Hello, hello, everybody. This thing that's come on. I swear to tell the truth. Go on, digital. Things with the find me. Nope. Let's see. Try again. Okay, now I think it's. Oh, there it goes. Now it's starting to follow me. Okay. Hello, everybody in Zoom land. Come on, turn on your cameras. We want to see you. We're all friends here. Don't matter if you're in your pajamas. Hello, everybody.
Hello, man.
Zoomland, I'll always like to introduce Roomland. Here's everybody. Oh, hey, everybody in Roomland. I always like to have five people. Everybody doing good? Writing up 5 contracts today. That's awesome.
Okay, yeah.
So while everybody's kind of still jumping on, we got people that are still logging in. So I've got a whole little thing to go through, and we've got a combination of some of the most talkative people on the planet that I know, which is a compliment, by the way. Okay, I didn't say Mark Miller. What did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
What?
No, but
Dang, are you talking about me?
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Hey, if you know, you know. If you're that person, my point is that I'm going to try to get through all the little slides I got, and then I'm going to hang around as long as you guys want to talk. But we're recording it for everybody else. I'm going to post it out, so I want to get through the material because it's a.
So now you're telling us to shut up.
I'm not telling you to
and
shut up,
you're
Liz.
Come on.
No. If you've got something, it's just burning a hole in your pocket. You got to say it, then you say it. But just, I will tell you that some of the things that come up in the beginning are going to get answered as we go through it. So, believe me, I've been teaching the ABR class every few weeks since March and all over, and it's the same questions. I get them over and over and over. So we know we all have the same, concerns and stuff. So I want to just get that out there so we can get through the material, and then I'm going to stay as late as y'all want. We can stay up here till midnight and order some Domino's. I don't care. Okay.
Hey, Marshall.
Mr. Marshall. Okay, so I'm gonna get into it. So we're getting down to the deadline of all this good stuff happening. I'm gonna go over everything with y'all, the best, what information we do have, and it's changing. I had a funny thing happen to me today, actually. Georgia MLS sent out an email about the deadline and changes, and I'm looking over the email and I'm reading it, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean, but I'm like, I don't think that's right. And so I called them, and the lady was like, let me check with my supervisor, and she put me on hold. She came back, she goes, still checking. I'll be right back with you. Come back, she goes, yeah, that's an error. That's an error. We're going to be changing that. And I mean, 30 minutes later, they sent out an email, urgent update, because this. And I'm like, well, I'm affecting policy. All right, that's really, I'm correcting MLS. That's great.
That's funny.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go through it, and we'll kind of get into it. It shouldn't. I hope at least the presentation part shouldn't last more than an hour, depending on if I get off track and start chasing squirrels or not. So glad to see we got almost 50 people on Zoom. That's awesome. Exciting. All right, so let's get into it. This whole thing is going to be about conversations and what conversations we're going to be having with which different people all together. So the theme of tonight is a conversation. We're just going to start talking about everything, right? All right. First one's going to be with MLS, which is what I was just referring to. So this is the rule that the MLS is all putting out, policy. And by the way, I haven't seen anything specific from Georgia MLS about how much the fines are going to be if you violate the rule. But we're a member of a lot of MLSs in multiple states, and I've been getting emails from MLSs in Florida that are thousands of dollars of fines, no warnings. And I'll show you. Here's one of them. So this is one of the emails we got from one of the boards in Florida, and it was no warning, first offense, $1,000 fine if you put any reference to a co-op commission in your listing. Because everybody's been like, well, what if we just use this, a special code and 3 bedrooms, 0.2, and they're saying, look, don't go there. Don't try it. Don't try to figure out a way. You just need to know they're very, very serious about this. And remember too, this is a point someone made. I've been watching a lot of videos, reading a lot of documents. They were making a point is this is being given to the MLSs as a revenue generator. So don't think they're let you slide. They're going to be looking at this as, hey, they expect they're probably going to lose membership. We're probably going to see agents, exiting the industry. Probably some of them will, and they're looking at this as a potential revenue generator. So just be aware of that. And by the way, if you can't tell by this, first offense, $1,000 fine to the agent. If that happens, we're going to say, gosh, that's tough. That's too bad. If it's a second offense and we get $1,000 fine, we're going to have a bigger problem. Now we're going to be coming to you for both the first and the second and the third fees. You're going to be coming to you. So, but we're hopefully not going to let that happen. We want to make sure everybody is up to speed and comfortable. Just don't try to figure it out. Like, we were talking about, could you upload it into the document section like your disclosure? No, you can't. Can't do it. Don't try it. It's not worth it. That's actually what I found. This was the email that MLS sent out yesterday, Georgia MLS. And it said, all of this stuff, here's the rules, no longer data listing fields, no longer there. MLS participants and subscribers working with buyers must have a written agreement before touring a listing. We're going to go through all that stuff too. Agreement must specify the compensation, et cetera. No advertising services that's free. MLS participants and subscribers must disclose and obtain seller approval upon for any payment offer for the listing broker or seller makes either the broker agent or representative. Off MLS offers of compensation are permitted. But then below that, it says this: compensation cannot be in showing time. It can be an offer manager, but it can't be in the showing instructions. And I'm like, that didn't sound right. So,
Be on a sign writer.
it could be anything off of MLS.
Okay.
Sign writers, somebody asked me, can I have a QR code? Sure,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do. Your website, but there's a key that we're going to talk about and how you know that it's safe. But this bottom one confused me because I'm like, I was very clear that showing time was a no-no. You couldn't put it in the showing instruction. No, that's a no-no because it's connected to the data feed. So I called MLS about it. That's what they put me on hold. Then 30 minutes later, they sent this one out. Urgent clarification. After further consultation and error on side of caution. Hey there. Oh, so signs down here says class. I'm sorry.
I asked you today where you were having it. You said upstairs. I said, okay, I'll keep the boutique open. They've been sitting there.
I apologize.
I
All pass.
said, I'll have to come up with a hall pass for you. So
Yeah.
sorry, they've been waiting upstairs for you.
I apologize about that. So
Started.
I did.
I know. They said come down. They're like, we've heard his introduction before. I'm like,
tell the same,
anyway, hello,
tell
everyone.
the same jokes every time. All right. Sorry about that, guys. We did just get started. I was kind of giving the intros. This was MLS sent this email out and it had this where you could put your instructions of compensation in your offer manager in showing time. I called them and they come back 2 minutes later and said, urgent clarification, after further consultation, error on side of caution, it is not permitted to use offer manager. I'm like, that's what I thought. So nowhere in anything to do with MLS can you put anything to do with compensation. One thing we need to remember too is we need to stop using the word commission and replacing that with compensation. And if you just say it, I promise you, if you say that word as many times as I've said it in the last month, I forgot the word commission now altogether. I'm just like compensation. Remember, it's going to be it potentially could be a revenue source for MLS. So don't think they're not going to forget and say, oh, we'll give you a pass. That's probably not going to be the case. So the rule is there's a 2-click rule, and that's how you can know that you're safe. So in other words, if everyone know, hey, come on in, we're getting going. This may be more folks live than I thought. We only have 4 that registered live, and everybody else has just popped in on us. So that's why I sat down.
Hey Shane, going back what is Office Manager? Which system is that?
That's what I call it now. So exactly what is that? And they were saying that's through showing time where you can manage your offer, but you can't use that either. So whatever it is, it's not, you can't use it for your compensation notes anyway. But the 2-click rule, what does that mean? So yes, your listings on MLS might have your company website, but you would have to go to your company website, and then from there you can have your co-op compensation listed. but it cannot be one click away from MLS. It has to be 2 clicks. And that's how you know you're safe. And just to let you know, I was actually on the next slide. This is something that's happening. So I think everybody that's on the call and also here in the room, we all have access to MoxieWorks through our, no matter which office we're with and which state we're in. You may or may not be using it or, for your own website, but as a company, each company website, you will be able to search listings, and MoxieWorks is giving us the ability to add co-op compensation on the company website on the listing. An agent will be able to go there and there'll be a little handshake on the information. They'll be able to click it to see what, if any, co-op commission is being offered.
It's 2 clicks away.
That's 2 clicks away. Exactly.
Websites being ones do.
Yeah, well, they won't be able to put that on that website. If you want to click from there to somewhere else, you can. So if your website provided by Georgia MLS, believe me, they're gonna whatever they provide, they're not gonna give you the ability to show anything on there about co-op commission, co-op compensation. So yeah, as long as it's out. Listen, by the time we get to the end of this tonight, you guys are gonna see where I think all this is going. And hang on. Let me see. There we go. You're going to see where all this is going, and ultimately, I don't think we're going to end up even dealing with co-op commission in our listing agreements or anything else, but we'll get to that in a little while. So eventually, went backwards. So all right, and for Georgia agents that are on the call now, look, there's each MLS, each has their own documents, and each state has their own, and we're going to talk about a few of them. I'm not getting into every single iteration of every state's documents. We wouldn't have time to do that. So I'm going to show a few examples of some from the Georgia documents we have, and each state will have some similarities and there will be some differences. So we'll just talk in general for the most part. But in Georgia, we have the 2 new documents. One is what used to be called the co-op commission agreement. It's now called the pre-showing agreement. And then there's the broker compensation exhibit that you actually attach to your contract. And so the question is, which one do you use? And rather than get into all the explanation, I actually have a video, and you don't have to do this right now because at the end of the class, I have a QR code, and I'll also put the link in the chat. I'm creating a town hall document on Google Docs that's public that has a lot of the references and some of the stipulations I'm going to give you for your offers. It'll all be there so you can go to it anytime and copy and paste it and things like that. This video that Seth Wiseman did is linked on there also. He explains it very well about, the 2 different documents, when they're used, who should sign them, things like that. So your conversations with the seller, these are all, kind of important that you get this in your head. So number one thing everybody's having to repeat, compensation is negotiable. It's on every document, it's bolded, every state we have, every document, they're all making that abundantly clear that we're saying, even though it always has been, we're making it very clear to the seller, it is negotiable. You don't want to use anything to do with if you don't pay the co-op commission, at least XYZ, the agents won't show their listing. That's not, that is wrong. You shouldn't say it. It's unethical first of all, for agents to do that. To be clear, it isn't inaccurate and it is not unethical to share with the seller. Listen, let's be transparent about it. The agents ethically cannot refuse to show your property based on what your co-op commission is. However, the buyers can choose to not look at your property based on what the co-op commission is. That's the buyer's choice, and that's nothing to do with the agent being unethical. And that goes along with telling the buyer the options they have to not be forced to pay the buyer broker commission, not be obligated. One of them being, before we go look at property, I'm going to get in writing what the co-op commission, if any, being offered by the seller is from the agent. Then you, Mr. and Ms. Buyer, can choose if you want to see the property or not, based on whether they're compensating you, your agent. Now, we'll talk about too, don't read minds, and meaning, I think it was Mark, actually talking to Mark Miller. He had a client, a seller, he went to their house and did the presentation, was encouraging them to do, the co-op commission. And they said, oh, I've been looking at CNN. Absolutely not. I'm not paying a dime to a buyer's agent. They can go, kick rocks. And Mark was, he wanted to get the listing, so he went ahead and listed it for his commission only with 0 to the co-op agent. Agent called him and said, as a co-op agent, co-op commissioner, well, it's in MLS right now, said 0. The agent comes in, brings the offer, full price offer, asking the seller to pay the buyer 2% of the buyer's obligation, and the buyer was going to pay the other 1. Seller said, yep, sounds good to me. So you can't assume, even if somebody's adamant that they're not going to pay it, that when the offer comes in, they're going to think about it. And it's just, we're going to replace the term co-op commission with, I say replace it, we're going to use this interchangeably the same way. Closing costs, co-op commission. Those two terms should be the same conversations. So in a lot of ways, you wouldn't go to a seller and say, I want you to commit on your listing agreement how much money you're going to pay the buyer's closing costs, how much of the closing costs, and I want you to sign this. You would say, you need to be prepared for it. You need to be, that they're going to ask you for it, but you didn't necessarily wouldn't ask them to commit to it in writing, right? And I think that's where we're going. That's what the Department of Justice wants. They want it to be totally separate. They don't want anything referencing a co-op commission on a listing agreement at all. They don't want us asking each other, how much is the seller willing to pay? They want you to put it in your offer and negotiate it. That's where we're going. And, the Department of Justice is still involved. So, you can, right now, we're still, doing what we're doing, and we're asking them to pay the co-op. We're going to be asking each other, what's the commission? What's the co-op? So I can tell my buyer and all this. But eventually, I think we're just going to talk to the buyers about it. We're going to talk to the sellers about it, and we're going to explain to the buyer, put it in your offer. Because same thing in that case where with Mark and that agent, if they had called him and said, hey, what's the co-op commission? And he said, well, it's 0. Mark's answer, the best answer he could have given, is your seller willing to pay? Put it in writing, put it in your offer. Whatever you're asking for, put it in your offer. And that's simple. That's simple. Because remember, whatever you put in the offer, whether it's the seller to pay this much in closing costs or the seller to reimburse the buyer, which we're going to get in those stipulations, the seller can say no, yeah, but that's a counter, and your buyer can walk away. So it's all becomes negotiable. It's not, no one's forced and no one's, whatever. And it's just conversations that we're going to have to get more comfortable having. You can, like I said, you can't say to a seller, well, if you don't pay a co-op commission of a certain amount, then nobody's going to show your house. Because agents were saying that, and that was part of the lawsuit, was that's wrong. Number one, it's not ethical. But it is realistic and ethical to explain to the seller that, hey, buyers may choose to not look at your property because they're not prepared to pay their buyer's agent. And they may say, well, if you're not paying them, and I'm hopefully they'll put it in writing, but just be aware. And if you're not willing to put it in writing for listing time, just know that you need to be expecting it. So that's one thing. Here's a breakdown of the new Georgia contract, and some of this can get a little complicated on your listing. I'm not sure if I didn't see on here if Melissa was on here, but she had an interesting one. She called me and said, okay, got a listing. Property was like 500,000. Seller was fine with paying the listing commission and paying a buyer broker. Buyer calls her up and been watching TV and and said, hey, I don't have an agent. I don't want an agent. I don't want you to represent me, and I'm not paying you because what are you doing anyway? And I'm going to have an attorney drop an offer, and I want you to present it. Now, her question was, okay, well, where does that leave me? And you think, well, gosh, that's complicated, because if you have your listing agreement and it's set to pay the co-op commission of a certain amount, and you are the listing agent, and there is no agent, but you still have to. Do you still have to have a buyer brokerage agreement in place that has a compensation, because your buyer brokerage agreement will cap the amount that you can receive as a buyer broker, whether you're a customer or client. So it was complicated. And so what I did was I said, let's go back and look at the listing agreement. And she did this correct. This is going to be important that you guys need to pay attention here. On this breakdown, if you see this, there's 2 options here. Okay, you can put the total commission here and the co-op commission here. Or you can put your commission here and their commission there. And what I mean is, look, we're not setting commissions and we're all under the same, umbrella. So I was going to tell you actual numbers that she was talking about. In her listing agreement, she had put 5% total. And she put 2.5% to the buyer broker. That meant the seller was agreeing to pay the listing broker 5% and authorizing the listing broker to compensate the buyer broker 2.5%, which means if there is no buyer broker, the listing commission is 5%. So I said, fortunately, you did that correct and you checked the correct boxes on your agreement, because you can tell that buyer, do whatever you want to. I'm being compensated by my seller. So, I don't have to give you anything concession wise. The buyer then comes back to her, by the way, before she had the conversation, and sends her a message that says, I was reviewing, got an attorney, I was reviewing the customer election form for the realtor for buyer's agent and was wondering, would you accept $1,000 to represent me as a customer and rebate the difference to me? And I'm like, so you see what they're doing. They're just trying to figure out, scheme a way to, get the money themselves or whatever. And I said, after we looked at her listing agreement, I said, you could tell them, no need. I'm not able or willing to do that. And also I'm being compensated by my seller. So, and by the way, another point on that particular one, remember, don't ever tell someone I'm not presenting that offer if it's, if it's not on a GAR form. We know that. We say, if you have your attorney draw this up, I just want you to be aware, this is what you can say. I want you to be aware that my seller has indicated to me that they are only going to want to do transactions based on our standard Georgia contracts or whatever. However, if you bring me an offer from your attorney, I will of course present it to my seller, but just be aware that they will likely instruct me to counter you on a GAR form. So I just want you to be aware of that. If you would rather, I can give you a sample contract to review with your attorney, and then you can tell me what you would like to put in the blanks if you would like. But just don't tell someone I'm not going to present the offer, because you can't do that. But yeah, the problem though is I have seen a lot of listing agreements where the agents didn't really think about this, and they would put 3 here and 3 there. That's a problem, because now the seller's only agreed to pay the listing broker 3%, and they've agreed to additionally pay the selling broker 3%. But remember, with our new rule that you have to have a buyer's agreement in place before you can, we're going to talk about what is touring and what is working with and all that. But it means that the buyer brokerage agreement, you can't collect more commission than that agreement states. And if the buyer is intentionally trying to cut that out, they're not going to agree to any amount because they want to get some kind of concession or whatever. That's a little bit complex, but as long as
you put 5 up there and it's 2.5 down there, they're not paying 7.5.
Correct. If you check the correct boxes.
Okay.
So like if you put that, let's say you put 5 here, okay, that's what's going to total commission. And then here's optional compensation. So right down here, you would say either, if any, being paid, a seller approves the following compensation being paid to buyer's broker by first box is seller in addition to the compensation paid by, that's where you would say 2.5, 2.5. And this one says seller's broker out of the compensation being paid. So I want to mention one other thing that we got to think about. Okay, the variable rate is going away, which is a good thing because 90% of agents didn't really understand what that was anyway. So the variable rate commission was a thing where you would see in MLS, it's a variable rate, yes or no. And what that meant was if I list a property and I agree to receive a lower commission if I bring the buyer than if another agent brought the buyer, that means the commission is variable based on who represents the buyer. That was something we had to disclose. And now that's going away from MLS too. They're not going to put that in there either. So, but be aware that you can come in here under this other section and say, for example, let's say a seller says, well, I'm not going to pay a buyer's agent anything. And you can't convince them otherwise. They want to put 0 in the co-op commission. This is where I would have a conversation and say, listen, that's fine. And that's your option. And we'll do that. But I want you to understand something. What's happening now is some buyers are reading online that they're going to get away with not having to pay anybody and do all this work that's involved. and they're trying to come in and, go around it or get some kind of concession. I understand there's a lot of work to be done as a buyer's agent. It's not just opening the door. There's 106 things that NAR has come out and said, these are all the things we do. So I want you to understand that if a buyer comes to me directly, okay, first off, it's going to be in your best interest, frankly, because I'm representing your interest. And if a buyer comes to me wants to write an offer, they're going to be a customer, and I'm not going to be representing their best interest. I'm going to be administrative for them. Open a door, turn on the light, fill in a blank. Okay. So it's probably going to be beneficial to you if a buyer comes to me and refuses to have a representation. Okay. It's unfortunate for the buyer that they don't understand that, but they will be at a disadvantage because I'm a seasoned negotiating realtor and I know this business. But that being said, I would negotiate with you to represent the buyer as a customer at a whatever, at a reduced rate, but I'm not going to do it for free. So I'll either, tell them to get another agent or get an attorney or whatever. And so I think it's fair to say, if they're not willing to do what we just talked about and they say, no, we're not paying anything, you should still say, okay, well, if a buyer comes to me directly, let's talk about what my compensation would be in that case. So I think it should be something additional, and what we just need to come up with something that's fair, because you can put that in the other section. So just be aware of those variables. And listen, it's going to be wild for about a month or two, but come December, January, it's just going to be the normal. So it's going to become what it is, and it'll, you're going to hear a lot of different things from a lot of people. I've heard a lot of crazy stuff already. Well, my broker said this, and so-and-so told me that, and I saw this video, and like, y'all just need to calm down, because you're getting ahead of yourself and everybody's getting, worried. But if we just calm down and just focus, the main thing MLS is doing right now is there's nothing we have to do. Co-op commission is going to be gone. It won't be there. So you don't have to go and delete it or anything. It's just not going to be there. So there's nothing that you're going to have to do to keep from getting in trouble there, as long as you don't have any remarks or documents attached to your listing that state anything about compensation, and no remarks in your public or private remarks. And that's what MLS is going to be policing. But you want to make, we're actually trying to go through administratively, looking at all of them, seeing if there's anything out there that needs to be addressed before we get to the deadline. But we need you guys to be looking at your own too. So don't try to read minds. I'll share this with you too, that I was watching a long video over the weekend from a broker, a national broker, and he was doing a Zoom meeting with, a lot of their agents all over the country. And it was an interesting perspective because, we have our perspective of, locally, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. But this broker was talking, in his mind, he said everything was national. And it doesn't even matter the company name. And you probably, when I tell you this, you probably know what I'm talking about. They made it a policy that they will no longer offer broker-to-broker compensation, period. So they will not offer co-op commission from the broker. Now, the seller can do that. You know how we're showing those two options? They're not going to list a property where it's the broker paying it out of their commission. They're going to make the seller say, this is what I'm going to pay, or zero. They're not going to take the liability of potential lawsuits in the future that they are, part of that. So, and he believes totally that, we will see a point where we won't have any reference to co-op commission on our listing agreements at all. And it'll all be put in writing, put it on the offer. And if I equate this to, like, if right now, again, going back to the thing about the closing costs, if someone said to you, well, Mr. and Ms. Seller, write down how much you're willing to pay pay the closing costs right now today when we list the house. You would think that doesn't make any sense. Well, why would you do that? You don't know what the situation is going to be. They may not need that much. Maybe it's all cash. Maybe this. It's the same thing. The truth is, the buyer's broker commission is the buyer's expense, just like a listing broker commission is a listing expense. It's not been that way. We've always had it be part of our fee, but the reality is it is the buyer's fee. That's their representation. And it's just like the lender charges the buyer closing costs. That's the buyer's fee too. But we have it doesn't even register that we're just having to negotiate that. The buyer's having the obligation to pay these expenses. Regardless of what house they buy, they're gonna pay these closing costs, right? So they're hoping that the seller pays their closing costs, but they don't always happen, different markets. So it's just gonna be the same thing eventually, I think. So the thing they were saying was don't try to read minds is like, he was just saying, don't try to put those commissions in your listing agreements because you don't know what the situation is. You might just negotiate the listing broker commission, and if the buyer's underrepresented, an additional fee or additional compensation. But eventually, you're probably just not going to even try to guess or try to mediate or all those things. So just thought. We talked about don't forget to discuss unrepresented buyers because if you just do one number or you do the 3 and 3 option or 3 and 0 or 2 or 5 or whatever you do, there won't be any compensation for you to represent the buyer that doesn't have an agency. Now let's all be honest about it. There's a lot of work to be done if you're a listing agent and a buyer comes to you without an agent. We all know, yeah, it's a pain because now I got to do all this and now I got to do all that. But if we really are honest about it, it probably goes a lot smoother. And it also is an advantage for your seller because the buyer's coming in and they're not going to be, as savvy as another agent will be. They're not going to be as demanding. The repairs usually go easier. So it's not the end of the world if you don't get compensated for both sides and you're writing up an offer for a customer. So just something to put out there. Some people may disagree, and I'm okay with that. I'll back you up. Whatever you if you nope, I'm not going to do that. I'll just say yep. The broker won't allow it. I'm like yep, nope, heck no. I'll back you up. Whatever you want to do. All right. So now we're getting into conversations with the buyer. All right. There's a lot of very broad language in the settlement verbiage. And we were like, okay, this language is kind of weird because they're saying, if you're working with a buyer and before you tour homes, and we're like, say it. What are you trying to, and now as I understand more, but the reason why they were so broad is because they're doing it for, all 50 states. And they're just trying to be broad enough to where they're not gonna, make any issues. But so what NAR has stated is the word touring is and they use a lot of words, we just have to break it down. When the buyer and or other agent at the direction of the MLS participant, AKA you, anyone who's a member of MLS, listing agent, right? Or buyer's agent, because you're both participants. At the direction of the MLS participant working with the buyer, enter the house. When the buyer at the direction of any member of an MLS that's owned by the board, working with the buyer, enter the house. That's the first part. This includes when the MLS participant or other agent at the direction of the MLS participant working with the buyer enters into the home to provide a live virtual tour for the buyer not physically present. So anytime you're setting up an appointment, setting up a showing, doing a virtual tour, these are all considered touring. Okay. Now, what is the working with part? So this is a little bit not as understood. Language is intended to distinguish MLS participants who provide brokerage services to a buyer, such as identifying potential properties, arranging for the buyer to tour a property, performing or facilitating negotiations on behalf of the buyer, presenting offers by the buyer or other services for the buyer from MLS participants who simply market their services just talk to a buyer. And goes on to say, if the MLS participant is working only as an agent or sub-agent of the seller, so okay, listing agent, right? Then the participant is not working with the buyer in that scenario. An agreement is not required because the participant is performing work for the seller. That's something that has not been really clear because we were all like, well, you can't even go in a house with somebody if they're not, if you don't have a buyer agreement, or they're saying you have to have a written agreement if you're working with the buyer. But they're saying clearly right here, if you're a listing agent and someone calls you to open the house, that's not considered working with the buyer. So
That way, because without that, you couldn't have an open house.
the example that they made was open house, okay, no, you don't have to have a written agreement before they come in the house.
Right.
So, and what they're saying here is similar to that. So however, I'm gonna go ahead and say better safe, and also these things are gonna be fluid and we may see changes. And the other thing they said on that video was,
Showing's an open house.
what's that?
Showing's an open house.
So it was an open house. I mean, yeah, right. But they basically said, we all know that there are lots of attorneys just standing by, waiting to see what opportunities there might be and what kind of, and we can't just operate in total fear, but you can be smart and you can be safe. And what I mean by that is, I would say you should probably have on deck, I think what we're gonna start seeing is a non-exclusive customer representation form that we all have just on deck, that's ready to go, digital signatures, just because it can't hurt. Here's what the underlying, if you understand the underlying meaning, then you understand what they're trying to accomplish. And it is, for many, many years, for almost forever, buyers have been calling up listing agents and not understanding agency, and no one had a conversation with them about it. And the agent says, oh yeah, I can help you, get your mortgage. And, agents are probably having conversations over the line. And buyers are like, well, this is what I qualify for, and this is where, I'll make this much money, and then realizing later, oh, I don't represent you at all, but they've just given all this information to the seller's agent. And that's not fair. That's what the point is that before you have any substantial conversation, substantial conversation, the buyer needs to understand who's representing who and who's paying who. And that's the point. So you can say, well, technically, if it's an open house and if I'm showing my own listing, I represent the seller, so I may not have to have an agreement. And then you go by your default agency in your state. So in Georgia, if you don't have an agreement in writing, you're a customer by default. Instead of just saying, well, I'm going to rely on that default position of the customer, and it's probably better that you still have the conversation, even if it's a quick one, and say, here's a customer election non-exclusive form, and I'm not even asking you for compensation. Just sign it so that you're recognizing that I don't represent you and that you're not, having to compensate me if I've done my listing agreement correctly. So they're saying, based on this, if you're showing a property that you have listed and you're working for the seller, then you technically would not have to have a buyer agreement to show that property because you're working on behalf of the seller. But it still is not going to hurt you to have it. So I think you have it on deck, because what happens if they go, what about that house across the street? Oh, I can't do that. Now I got to have agreement. So why not just go ahead and say, hey, here's a non-exclusive, any property that I show you, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you decide on your listings to say, I'm not going to ask you for compensation because I got my seller paying me, and they choose to see another property, you're going to need a different agreement to make sure you get compensation, So, I know I don't want to make it sound complicated either. We want it to be simple. The reality is, if I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to use the stipulations that I'm going to share with y'all, and I'm not going to really worry so much about what co-op compensation is being offered by the seller from all the other agents, because I'm going to explain it to my buyer, and I'm going to put it in the offer, and it won't really matter. We even went through some scenarios, because I was running down some options and scenarios with an agent today, and they were like, well, what if the seller's paying more than your buyer brokerage, and what if the seller's not? And I'm like, well, if you think about it, if you just put your agreement with the buyer broker compensation, if you put that in your offer, and I'll show you the stipulation in a minute, because if your buyer's agreement says that they agree to pay you, let's just say 3, if the comp being offered by the listing by the seller is 4, you can't collect 4. You can only collect what's in your buyer brokerage. That's your cap. So if you had 2 and they said 3, you still can't collect the difference. And if the opposite of that, if they said they're only going to pay 1 and yours said 3, if you put it in the offer, it's negotiable. So they can say yes or no.
Okay, and that's not what we're talking about. Is in that situation, all I can collect is 3, but can I negotiate the other 1% to go back to the buyer as a?
So I'm going to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking.
If the seller is offering 4.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you may find out that the seller's offering 4 and your buyer broker says 3. Your options would be, okay, I can either amend my buyer's broker and ask them if they would be okay with me getting the additional, which, I don't know if they do that. And if they wouldn't, let's say, then you at least know that the seller had planned it and you might could try to use that in your negotiating strategy and say, well, we want a concession or more closing costs or whatever, but they would not be required to pay it,
No, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't hear that, but you could use, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, it's like,
Yeah.
you could use it in your negotiating situation.
And
Then
you
it's like, you know, hey, I just got you out buyer.
giving you this benefit, yeah. And remember, you can negotiate, parties to an agreement can negotiate their agreement. So like if you have a listing agreement and it's, let's say in Mark's case, he said, I'm not paying a dime to the buyer's agent. And Mark had the buyer come to him directly. And he was like, well, I'm gonna have a lot more work. He could have went back to the seller and said, look, here's the situation. This buyer's come in, they don't have an agent, they're wanting to get a deal. Would you be comfortable with me, with paying me an additional 1% or something like that to work with them? And what he could renegotiate that if the seller would agree to it, Okay, more things about the buyer conversations. It's very important. We need to be thinking of, we honestly, what they want is, just like if a seller called us up and said, hey, I want you to list my house on the MLS, go ahead and put a sign up and put it in the MLS and I'll sign a listing agreement, when you bring me an offer. You'd say, no, that's not how this works. I can't even do that. Like, I can't even wait until next week to get the document. I can't even do anything until I get the agreement. That sounds silly to say it out loud. But that's what we did with buyers for all these times. So we need to be thinking of buyers the exact same way. And the fortunate thing is we're all having to do this and have this conversation. So it won't be, it used to be, well, other agents aren't making them do that. Other agents aren't, and so we didn't want to risk it to lose the buyer because another agent might do it. Well, now we're all being required to have this conversation. Yes, some people will be breaking the rules. That's going to happen, but hopefully they'll get caught out on that. But so it means that when a buyer calls you and says, hey, I want to see a property, whether it's your listing or any other listing, the reaction should be just like if a seller says, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house. Wonderful. Hey, when's a good time for us to get together and have a conversation about how all this works? And let me give you my, my presentation, my buyer's, value package or whatever you want to call it. But you need to be thinking that's my first step, not go unlock the house. And hopefully everybody else will get to, that's going to be the normal, that no one, it would sound silly to say, I'm not going to go and open a house for you in 20 minutes. That doesn't even make sense. Why would I do? That's hopefully we're going to get to eventually. Here's the other hard truth, that people who are good listing agents are not as nervous right now as people who aren't. And what I mean by that is, for years and years and years, buyer's agents really didn't have to have uncomfortable conversations with clients about money. Because it was always, oh, well, literally, you could just say, I'll take whatever the seller's offering. And that's, in South Carolina, there's a box that used to be on the buyer brokers that said, I'll take whatever I'm being offered. And if that's zero, so be it. So it was like, I'm just not going to have that, because other agents I know are out there not wanting to have the conversation. So that is changing, but people who are primarily buyer's agent focused are more nervous about all these changes than people who are listing agents, for obvious reasons. Number one, you're a listing agent, it's actually could be pretty good for you right now, because what's going to happen is the same thing that happened with Melissa on her deal. Buyers are going to be thinking, oh, I'm not going to, it's really harmful for the public, to be honest with you. It's hurting the buyers.
That'll be the next lawsuit.
I'm surprised that the courts, nobody pointed this out to the buyers, to the courts, is that, hey, you're setting up a system where buyers don't have the money to pay it.
Right.
And they're going to think, well, I can't use an agent. I'm going to have to go to the listing agent and have no representation. It's just a bad formula. And until it gets more information out there, people understand. So anyway, but you're going to have to get better at explaining your value and explaining what is happening now versus what used to, and how it's not that different, really. It's always been negotiable. It's just been included. Before, the listing agent negotiated with the seller, and the buyer's agent just benefited from that. Now it's more transparent and it's more clear, and the buyer, and so how we are answering questions, even to our friends and people on Facebook, is important too. I went to dinner with some friends of ours, Tracy and I went to dinner, and this is somebody I went to high school with. We sat down at dinner and he had this frown on his face and he goes, man, what's going on with all the stuff about commissions and stuff? He's a salesperson in a different industry. So he was like, you must be freaking out. And he was all like this. And you know what I said? I'm like, actually, I think it's awesome. I think it's a great thing. I said, it's going to have more transparency to the public. People are going to understand who's representing who and who's compensating who. So that's actually going to be a great thing. And he goes, oh, well, that's good. That's good to hear. You know, so how I responded, it was going to affect how he talked to other, what'd you say?
If you lied to him.
I didn't lie. I did not lie to
I
him.
think,
I-
I don't do much,
Yeah.
but to me, it's a good thing. because
It is.
It, you know, it actually makes people have to understand the business they're in a lot
Yeah.
better.
Here-
And
Here's,
it also creates, an environment where the people, you know, we really have the pros
Mm.
versus
Yeah.
the.
that's actually what I was about to say is,
Yeah, well, the same with me, I mean, I'm sorry.
well, what I was actually going to say
I
is
like-
that, yes, okay. What's going to happen is the people who aren't comfortable enough having these difficult conversations are going to struggle, and many of them won't make it. And I feel bad for those people, which are none of these people in this room and nobody on Zoom, because we're all awesome agents, we know. But the point is, people who aren't really committed and strong about with getting better at this conversation are going to struggle, and it's going to leave more opportunities for agents who are better at it. So it's going to make the industry better regardless of how. It's going to be the more professional and serious people who are, you know, these are going to be the people who
I just tell everybody
Figure
it's
it
business as usual.
business it is.
Really not change that
Yeah.
much, you
So
know?
we all going under the approach and assumption that none of the buyers are gonna come to us saying, yeah, I've got 3% to pay you, because they never have.
Correct.
We're always figuring out a way to
Have the
negotiate
conversation.
it and make everybody understand that it's always been a seller's, in a nicer way, it's always been a seller's expense, it's gonna have to be.
It's always been a house expense. The way I've said it is the
Yeah,
house is always paid.
What I want to ask you at the end of this
yeah.
is how appraisals are gonna take.
How the appraisals are going to work.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's got to be.
Yeah.
And one other thing,
Yeah.
at the end, when the person selling the house, when they purchased it, who paid the commission
Right.
then?
Exactly. All the sellers in that lawsuit, if you go back and ask them, when you bought the house that you're suing about, as a buyer, did you pay your buyer's agent out of your pocket? No, you didn't, and you couldn't have. So,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, one of the things I was saying though is the house, the price was inflated a little bit to cover the,
sure.
There's
And,
gotta
and
say
that,
that.
it all came from in 2020 and 2022, when it was 22 offers on the first day, and people were flipping houses and the prices were going up like crazy. They were saying a lot of that increase was to cover all the commissions and things, which, again, it's always been that way, and it's still that way. You know what I mean? It's just, we're talking about it more. The only actual,
Supply.
it is
Yeah.
supply and
I
demand.
mean, it's
Yeah.
not.
I think you're gonna have to you're just like how, if you're going on a listing appointment, you have to get comfortable having the conversation about listing the commissions and things like that. And you're gonna have to do the same thing with buyers. And you all know, okay, yeah, the buyers aren't gonna have a check. And just be transparent with buyers. Listen, I get it. You're concerned, you're stressed, you don't have the money to pay my commission. I don't expect you to. That's the whole point, is we know that you won't until you buy the house. The house will ultimately, is how I'll get paid. Now it's just a matter of, we have to negotiate it line by line, versus before it was already negotiated before we got here.
So it's not, so you can put it in the offer, or
Yes.
is it a separate piece of paper?
It's in the offer, but it's specific, and I'm gonna show you how you copy and paste these stipulations here in just a second.
Amendments. Contract.
Hey, Shane.
Okay, yes.
Hey, so I find an eye opener for the seller. If you have a seller and they selling a house, they have to buy a house. When it comes to the cooperation, if they're real tight to their pocket to say that, oh, I'm not paying a commission. Now they have to face, they get ready to purchase a home.
Yeah.
Are you going to pay the commission?
Do you understand? Exactly. That's a good point. But if the seller says, I'm not gonna pay, say, well, to realize this, when you sell this house and you buy the next one, are you intending on writing a check to the buyer's agent on that one? And you're probably not. And so there's a very specific, here's the deal, we're gonna talk about this at the end, but if you have, who's already taken the ABR? Okay, so we got a couple
That's a
people,
long time ago.
not a long time ago. Take it again, it's free
Okay.
this year, it's free, and it probably won't be next year. So I've been teaching it every month for, all over the place. But you need to get the tools and because the ABR is all about having at the consultation, having the conversation about compensation, representation, all these things are part of that class. And you're going to have to get, we go over, there's 4 opportunities that you can talk to your buyer and say, listen, I know you don't have the money to pay your commission, to pay my commission. I don't expect you to. And here's how this works. It's just like closing costs. When you get a loan, your lender is going to have expenses in that process. It's your responsibility. It's always been the buyer's responsibility to pay their closing costs. But we negotiate that with the seller. And if you don't have all the money to pay that, which most buyers don't, we ask the seller to pay that. The seller can agree, the seller can refuse, but if they don't agree to your offer, it's a counter offer. You can now walk away. So that's the first one. First, you could not look at the property based on the compensation that they've offered. That's first. Next, if you want to look at the property and write an offer, we put the stipulation in the offer for the seller to cover your expenses, and that's a negotiable item, just like closing costs. Seller says no, you can walk away. If you still want to buy the property, then we come back and offer, we increase the price and ask the seller to pay the difference for your buyer brokerage commission. Then we have to deal with the appraisal issue. But that's another option. If either the seller says no, or the appraisal comes in low, you can walk away. So you can see, if you can explain this to a buyer, look, I know it sounds intimidating, but I don't expect you to write a check. We're going to work out and negotiate through the negotiation process, how I'm compensated the way it's always been done. We're just going to have to do it on the offer rather than on the listing agreement. If you can explain it to somebody, that can make sense to people, And I don't have a slide on this, so I'll go ahead and mention it. We talked about the appraisal issue. So yes, I do believe, we potentially could have some appraisal issues if we start increasing the prices. However, appraisals are subjective and they're individual, and you have conservative, and you have liberal appraisals and all this. I believe as an ex-appraiser, I believe as an industry, appraisers are not going to be shocked when they see the list prices here and the sales price goes up by 2 or 3 or whatever percent. That's going to probably be like, okay, I see what happened there. The seller, in theory, the seller didn't price the property at the maximum price and reduced the price. And now they're going back up to market value because now they're having to pay the buyer broker. I'm going to give that some consideration, but I'm still going to have to prove it with the comps. The benefit's going to be that I'm not trying, I'm not trying to disprove it, because I say, okay, well, now I'm going to look at comps as if that property were properly priced, valued. And if I can't prove it, I can't prove it. But I shouldn't be, as an appraiser, I shouldn't be just automatically coming in low because you increase the price, because we understand that's going to be happening. Just like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and VA and all of them have made concessions and say, okay, we get it. Okay, it's not going to be considered unusual, so we're not going to count it against them and all that. I feel like it's going to be the same thing. No guarantees, but what's the appraiser is also going to be looking is the seller trying to make all the value and not pay? And if that's the case, then they won't that the numbers won't come in. But remember, if you're trying to explain to your buyer how they can not be obligated under those to pay the commission, the compensation, if the seller refuses to increase the price or the appraisal comes in low, that's a walk away. You're not going to be forced to write a check. You can walk away. So you just need to be able to explain that to buyers.
Shane, I just want to
yes.
say, I'm going to be happy not to do any bank appraisals. I just want to say that.
You're going to be happy not to do it, right?
I don't do them as it is. Yeah, thanks.
That's a good question, because, do you have an opinion about that since you are an active appraiser?
So most of my work comes from, I do any bank appraisals this year. I have something special that I'm doing that's for a bank. It's refinance. It's only because it's a big project, but normally the work that I have has not, I haven't done I think I did a bank appraisal, maybe one last year. I've
Mhm.
been able to avoid them.
Do you think appraisers will consider, what's changing and how we're having to go about our offers? If they see the sales price increase over the list price, do you think it's going to be something they'll have in general, more understanding or at least consider it?
So before, when I used to do them, back in the day, and even there were times when that was happening anyway. But we
Mhm.
can only, just like you said, we can only use the market, compare the
Right.
comps, yeah. And so that's going to be the telltale thing, because we
Yeah,
can't,
I agree.
I can't
Yeah,
make it, I can't
you
make
can't make
it,
it up.
make it up. And I think with all that's going on, it's going to be a lot. I'm going to have that conversation with the ones that I network with, and what do
Right.
they think about it,
Yeah,
and see.
hey, you may have some appraisers that are holding a grudge about it and be like, no, I'm not gonna, but hopefully that's the exception. I think, because as an appraiser, when I was appraising, I would take the sales price, whatever the contract said, and I would look for comps above and below that, and I would start comparing and try to find the best comps that were most similar. So you're going to take the fact that there's a contract purchase and sale as, okay, this is my starting point. I'm proving or disproving from here. I'm not going to, but not everybody's the same. So
Yeah, but think
going forward,
about the market, how it was just a few years ago,
yeah,
when they
yeah,
were, when everyone was overbidding.
right.
We had that issue going on, kind of, I mean, it was the same issue.
Yeah,
So it
it
was
was,
like,
it
how
was.
do you come up with
And
that value? Yeah.
I agree. And on to your point, and to illustrate what I was just saying, is when we had the crazy time in 2022, when there were multiple offers and highest and best and all this, and you saw the
Hmm.
prices going up very quickly, the question is, well, how does appraisals even keep up with it? Because they're historic by nature. They're looking at comps that happened before. And this was a one-time thing. I'd never seen it before. I've never done this as an appraiser, but we had an appraisal come in on a property. They gave a $5,000 per month time adjustment for every month back that the comp had closed. I'd never seen an appraiser do that before. 3-month-old comp, they gave them $15,000 for time adjustment. 6-month-old
I would
comp,
be
they gave them.
afraid.
I would
I
be
would be
afraid too.
afraid to do that because
I would be
of,
too. I would. But
and
yeah,
when the stuff hits the fan, who are they going to come
right.
after?
I
And
agree.
they aren't
I
going to
agree.
care. So that's how a lot of my colleagues got out of, even
Yeah.
they don't do, they
Liability.
do,
Yeah,
yeah, they do more of the hard money,
yeah,
or just
I
other.
agree. And
Hopefully,
the point
I'm
there is
going to ask that question.
I would never have expected that to happen. But that's kind of the point is you really don't know what to expect. One appraiser might do something and one appraiser might say that's absurd. I would never do that. So some of it's on the luck of the draw. So
Mhm.
more conversation with the buyer. Yeah.
Since a lot of your appraisers and us too, we're doing CMAs, the closed sales, not active sales. or
The closed sales. Mhm.
The bottom portion always shows you what the seller's
Contribution,
compensation was.
contribution. That's true. It's only going to show
Are
closing
you gonna
costs.
take that away?
Well, I don't know if they changed that away, but you're right. If they're not showing what they're offering, what they paid the co-op agent on the MLS, which they won't, then the appraisers aren't going to have that advantage of knowing whether they did or didn't pay. And
As listing agents, should we put
you
it?
can't put it in the MLS. I don't think you can put it even past that.
Still in contribution.
Yeah, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out. Okay, more conversation with the buyer. Make sure that, it's on all the documents. Make sure you reiterate compensation is negotiable. This is what I charge. This is my fees. You may find somebody who's cheaper than me, but you get what you pay for, whatever you want to say. You verify the MLS co-op commission. That's going to be another question. How do we do it? I don't know exactly. We don't have a singular methodology because it can't be connected with MLS. I can tell you that if it's most people will have the ability through maybe their website that you can do it. You may have to email, text message. So the other question is, okay, how do we get this compensation agreement? Okay, yes, number one, ideal, best case scenario is co-op commission agreement, which now it's called showing, whatever it is in Georgia. That's ideal. And as a listing agent, I would have it on deck, have it ready, already filled out with the compensation you're offering. So the agent calls you, boom, I can text it to you. It's in I've got it in my computer or my phone. I can do whatever. Not all agents are going to do that, right? The question is, what about an email? What about a text message? Obviously, these are going down the line in preference. And people would argue, oh, text message. But I also do believe that with us being, showing property and going, I believe if you have written communication from an agent specifically about what their client is offering you as a co-op commission, I believe, you'll be safe with that. And that it could turn out to be not true. So ideally you want the commission agreement from the other agent. What is the co-op commission being offered in writing, ideally? But remember, if you just put it in your offer, it goes away. Like you don't really care what they're offering because you're going to put it in your offer every time. So it shouldn't be a big deal. I would remind people to and obviously you don't tell your buyer the service is free. That's the problem we had before. Constantly compare compensation for buyer brokerage to closing costs. Make the analogy. Explain how you're getting a mortgage, you're going to have expenses for that. You may not have that money. We're going to ask the seller to pay for that. Same thing with your buyer brokerage. Your representation is an expense to that. There's work that has to be done. You may not know how much work it is, but it is a lot of work. And there's expenses for that, and we're going to ask the seller to pay for that. Try to make that comparison because people understand, oh, that's right. Closing costs is my loan, my expenses, but I'm definitely going to ask the seller to pay that. So your fee is the same thing. So you just make those connections.
Hey, Shay,
Explain how. Yeah.
did you say we can put it on the yard sign?
Yeah. Anything off of MLS. Anything that's not on MLS, and if it's digitally, it just has to be 2 clicks away from MLS. So it can
Okay.
be a link on your website, but it can't be, displayed on your website directly linked from MLS, I guess is the best way to say it.
Now, so when you said your website, if it's our website Moxie, that's not the MLS. Are you saying we have to have it we can't have it in writing, we have to have a link?
No, so on the website, Moxie's going to allow us to put the co-op commission into the listings. What it'll be is you'll pull up the listing and then you'll have a button that says, co-op amount, a co-op commission offered, a co-op compensation, rather buyer broker compensation. And you click on that and it'll show you what that amount is. But in theory, if you're on MLS and you click on our website, it goes to our website and then you have to click on compensation. So you're 2 clicks away. So you're still good.
Right.
Anything on your website, our company website, any of those things are fine.
Okay.
And then
Thank you.
I think you really need to get competent at going through that buyer options about how they can negotiate the commission to be paid by the seller. That's what we do in the buyer ABR class, but you need to get fluent in explaining that and say, the more confident you are, the more ability you're going to have to be able to express what if you come in saying, yeah, this is crazy. I don't know what to do. They're not going to, if you're saying, this is how it works. I understand that you don't have the money to pay me as a buyer. I understand that. And here's how we're going to address that. Here's how we're going to go after that. Here are your 4 opportunities that you won't have to pay this buyer brokerage out of your pocket. I don't expect you to write a check. Number 1, you can not look at the house. If not. Number 2, we'll ask the seller to pay your obligation. Number 3, we can increase the price. Number 4, you can walk away. And don't forget about number 5. If you so choose, you can also negotiate. We don't think about that. In other words, if you have a listing and you say, my compensation is whatever it is, and you're negotiating a contract and you get to within a certain amount, have you not ever negotiated your commission to make the deal work? Most of us have. So I can tell you this as a listing specialist, what I told my sellers is, listen, Mr. and Miss Seller, I have never allowed my commission to stop a closing. That's a pretty strong comment. If we get, I will never let this deal fall apart for less money than I'm making, especially I'm a seller, especially if you're buying a property from me. And again, I don't ever hope to have to take a, a major hit on a commission, but I want the seller to know that I'm a deal maker. I'm gonna make the deal work. I'm gonna figure out a solution. I'm not gonna sit there and go, yeah, you gotta pay my, I'm going to negotiate and get the deal done at all costs. And that's powerful. If you can tell a buyer, listen, my commission's not gonna stop you from buying a house, okay? If we get down to it and the seller won't negotiate, just like your closing costs, if we get, if they're willing to pay my commission, my cost, my broker compensation, and they're not willing to pay all your closing costs and you need it and you can't make the deal work, before we just start over and go to, I might help you out. I might throw in, $500 or whatever, depending on the situation. But let's get into the negotiation and figure out what we can do. So just some things you can think about. This is the buyer broker, on the Georgia documents now that we have, and it's similar structure to the seller one, the listing brokerage. It basically says generally compensation to brokers is negotiable, not set by law, does not obligate individual licensed brokers to necessarily negotiate their compensation. Here's where you would put in your compensation the buyer agrees to pay you. C is where optional compensation from seller or seller's broker to buyer broker, and the buyer can approve or disapprove. I don't know why they would disapprove you being compensated from
You
the,
would put both slots.
what's that?
You would put something in both slots, right? Because you're putting what they're agreeing to pay and then what the seller, and so
Yes.
if the seller pays it all, they don't have to pay.
Exactly. So in most cases, you're gonna put your compensation you're expecting here, you're gonna put approves, buyer hereby approves, the buyer's broker receiving compensation from the seller or selling broker. And then, you could put an amount. Remember, it is being stated that the amount that you put here is the maximum. I have seen, people's different opinions, but in ABR class, they talk about a stipulation you can add that allow you to be paid a range. So you could say anything from this number to this number, your obligation will be considered met. So you might put, for example, anything from 2 to 4, as an example. If anything outside of what you have in writing, you would either have to not collect it or do an amendment to your buyer brokerage, and they would have to agree to it.
So put 3 to 5%.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen different opinions about that, and we may find they may come back and say, nope, that's not good. But I've seen in the ABR class, they give us stipulation that shows you how to write it where a range of compensation is. You can't say 0 to 100, obviously, but then where is I don't know where you draw the line. And D. So this is where on D is where you would say, if I am compensated by the buyer broker from the seller or seller's broker, it will reduce compensation paid by buyer dollar for dollar. That's really what you probably would put there. Because then you could say, or not reduce, which wouldn't make any sense because then you get 2 double, and then any other special exceptions be there. Yeah, fine with me, right? But yeah, you're gonna see your compensation here approves probably the same amount there, and then reduce compensation dollar for dollar, which you're probably gonna mostly put there. Don't try to read minds. Is what I kept remembering them saying is, eventually we're gonna get to, you're just gonna negotiate your amount with the buyer. The listing agent is gonna negotiate their amount with the seller. They're not gonna tell each other what they are, and you're gonna write what you're looking for in your offer every time. I believe I think our documents will ultimately get to where, just like we have a line in there that says seller agrees to pay this much closing costs, I believe it's gonna also say seller agrees to pay the buyer's broker commission amount of this. I think it's gonna get to that, or it's gonna say seller's total concession will be this, and it's gonna include closing costs, buyer broker, whatever. That would be great. Perfect world. I think that's where we're gonna get to, especially the DOJ has their way. They don't want us to even talk about it. They want it to be in the offer. Okay, here's a stipulation, and by the way, you don't have to start writing all this down because I have it on a Google Doc, and this QR code, I've got it again later on. This QR code, and I'm gonna put it in the chat too for everybody if you're using your phone. But it goes to a Google Doc, and you can copy and paste it verbatim and paste it into your offer. And it also has that video that let me get that out of the way. I think this is probably going to block you from these controllers. This controls here. Let's see here. There we go. That may help. There's that video from Seth Wiseman's also on there that you guys can look at. But There are two different stipulations I put in here. One is straight from the GAR forms that we have from Georgia Association of Realtors, which is this one here. The second one is from the ABR class itself. And ABR is written more on a national level versus this is on a more of a local level. So this is more, a little more wordy because they're trying to, the national level has to be a little bit more broad. But this one is for seller to buyer broker. The seller is paying the buyer broker. This is that example of the 3 and 3, not the 6 and 3. That makes sense. It's not really the one you want to be using as a listing agent, but from a buyer's perspective, this is asking the seller. This says buyer hereby requests and seller hereby agrees to pay the buyer broker at closing the following compensation for professional services. You put amount, percentage, or some variable. Nothing herein shall be interpreted as a request to alter, modify, or change the compensation to be received by seller's broker, if any, that the seller may have agreed to pay seller's broker any separate written agreement. A lot of just cover your butt stuff, but mainly is the seller agrees to pay the buyer broker at closing. That's the main thing. The other one, which I really kind of prefer, is this one here. This is the one we get in the ABR class. This is where the seller is paying buyer directly. And it says seller and or any third party to this settlement and transfer of this property agrees to pay buyer X of the sales price to settle their contractual agreement with their buyer broker at closing.
So that's gonna go in the special steps, in addition to the exhibit that's gonna be attached, the 259, is that?
Well, the exhibit is not necessarily required. If you have the co-op commission agreement or the pre-closing, or they're calling it, if that's in writing, you don't have to have that exhibit. That's it's an either or thing. It's how Seth explained it. It's if you don't have anything in writing, and that's something that you're going to put in there to show it. In my opinion, though, you're kind of in a gray area, because that's the whole point of this stipulation, is that it's not ethical, or a license violation and unethical for you to negotiate your offer of compensation on the buyer's contract. That if you just simply said selling broker to receive X commission, what you're ultimately saying is I'm going to renegotiate my offer of compensation from the listing agent, and that's the license violation and unethical, because it's not your contract. It's the buyer and the seller's contract, so you can't negotiate your deal. That's why you have to say buyer is requesting. And so to me, by putting an exhibit that says here's what everybody's getting paid, you almost could negotiate it there, which is kind of against the rules that we thought we were, you're not supposed to do that. So I don't necessarily agree with the exhibit piece, even though they've given it to us. So
You're okay, it's not exhibit, it's having this right here in the special step.
yeah. And if somebody has the
So that's
exhibit,
one less exhibit you have to say.
yeah, I agree. One less exhibit. If you just put this in all your offers, and you should be covered. Now, I will say that if you have another agent, because again, remember, every agent is going to interpret it this different. Every broker is going to maybe interpret it different. They may tell you, oh, you have to have this. It's against the law. You go to jail. Just sign it. It's not worth fighting somebody over about. I watched Seth Watson's video. Get the deal done. You know what I mean? Like, let's get to closing. I'm not gonna tell you you're an idiot, even if you are an idiot, because I want my client to get to the closing. Hey,
Might come out of my mouth,
well, Liz said it might come out of her mouth. You're an idiot. You'd be like, sound like the Grinch. You're an idiot. Okay. DOJ, this guy, I've already talked about this a lot, but the Department of Justice wants a total decoupling of conversation about co-op compensation. They don't want us talking about it. They don't want it in our listing agreement. They want the buyer to deal with their agent and the seller to deal with their agent, and then everybody negotiate, put in your offer, like closing costs. They don't want us to have the seller agree to pay a co-op commission of any kind at the time of listing. And that's not the case right now, but they agreed to not go forward with it and settle. Then they reneged on it, and then NAR sued and said that we had an agreement, and the courts come back and said, nah, we'll let them back out. So now they're able to now still come after the industry and NAR, which this is what they want. I think it's their first step. They got this part to happen. Now the next step is going to be easier once we get used to this. It's going to be no more reference to co-op compensation on your listing agreement.
It's really just trying to get rid of the collusion that was in place before.
Yeah, it's just,
So it's now,
yeah,
I mean, but after
Yeah.
the fact, you ought to be able to negotiate anything. It's like y'all didn't. sit
Yeah,
down before.
it's not predetermined,
Right, so after the fact, you ought to be able to sit there
Yeah.
and say, we can make this deal happen,
Right.
but the seller's gonna have to pay or contribute this month.
And that's, you know, again, I don't agree with the lawsuit, but one of the arguments of the lawsuit was that, you know, sellers were made to feel that if they didn't pay that amount of total commission, that nobody would show their house, that the agents would make the decision to not show their houses. And frankly, before 1999, that really was a thing. Like the agents know, the consumers didn't know what was for sale. They had to ask the agents, hey, what can you find me with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths in the school district or wherever? They did, or they look at a magazine. They didn't have the ability to go online and look at everything. So the last 10 years, good luck in trying to not show a property based on compensation. Because your buyer's gonna be like, I saw this on Zillow or Realtor.com. I want to go see it. Now you pretty much you're not able to hide listings like they used to. So it's not really as much of a factor, but it was something. It happened. Oh, it's not available anymore. Yeah. Oh, sure. Of course. And you definitely, whether you did it consciously or not, you could impact people's, you know, you could say, oh, yeah, that's not a good, you know, whatever. You can make a frown and people are like, oh, that's not a good house or whatever. So it was a thing. And I had agents explicitly say to people, I'm not showing that house because it's not, you know, I don't work for that kind of money. I'm not gonna show your listing, you know, like, so yeah, it was a thing. Not everybody did that.
Or-
Some people did.
Or in private remarks, it says cash only.
What's that?
Or they tell them in private remarks, it says cash only.
So
And
you're
they know
saying
the
is
client
that-
has the FA. That's the
Oh,
line they
oh,
give.
yeah, I got you.
But in
Yeah.
private
That makes-
remarks, it say cash only. They
Oh,
know they have an
Yeah, I
FHA
see what you
loan.
mean. Like, they would just tell the
Right.
client, oh yeah, it says cash only. You got to get a loan. So this is not, it's not gonna match. It's not be a good match. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Hey, Shane, I don't know
Yeah.
if you plan on talking about this, and this is more of a contract, but I think it works really well what we're talking about right now. If you look at the new instruction to attorney form, at the very bottom, they added a line in there where the seller had to sign. Are you familiar with that?
In which form you said?
The-
Oh, yeah.
That-
And by the way, that was also something that was stated that that's only if it's different than what they agreed to in the listing agreement. So it's only, you don't have to, if they've already agreed to it in the listing agreement and you're just executing what they've already agreed to, that's not required. But if you negotiate anything different, then they do have to sign. That's how it's been explained to me.
Yep.
We may find out.
Yeah, so yeah, I get several calls a day on that.
Yeah. And here's the deal. Even if somebody says, no, I heard that the seller has to sign it, fine. They've already agreed to it. They can't get out of it. You know, it's only going to be refused because of that document.
So we ended up only paying 3%, so I told the other, if you want to do one, I'll do 2. Or it
Yeah.
was just, I didn't want my buyer to lose
Yeah.
the deal.
Yeah, unfortunately, it comes down sometimes to who's
But he
willing to
do
pledge.
enough to be dangerous. I
Yeah.
think the guy may not be a real estate agent, but he looks like he dabbles in it. so
Yeah.
it's
So he just decided he was gonna play hardball and it
And he
comes
did it
down
day
to
before closing,
day before
so-
closing. Comes down to who's willing to flinch first.
And it was a cash deal, so
Mm.
I don't know what my buyer did.
Right. Yeah, that's unfortunate. But the way I've been explained to understand it, if that's what the listing agreement said and that's what, and you're accepting what the co-op commission is being offered is, then it's not required for a signature. But you'll have some agent will mistakenly send it or the
And I think
attorney's
that's
office
what
might send
triggered
it.
him.
Yeah.
He saw that.
Yeah.
sign and
Yeah.
said, "He's putting his
Yeah,
phone
you are spot on, Shane.
Yeah, I literally had this conversation with someone that I forgot who it was, but it was just a little while ago. But they said that they had the listing and everything was agreed to, and the seller agreed to pay the, you know, whatever it was commission. And then it got to closing and they got the settlement statement and they called just raising Cain and said, I'm not paying you $20,000. What? And they said, well, you know, that's you agreed to. He said, yeah, but 6% sounded such a small number. I'm like, well, you say, well, you know, I can't give you a discount for just
Not knowing.
being
that.
stupid, like, you, anyway, it was pretty fun.
I guess it must be.
A net sheet, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, net-
Always give a net.
Yeah.
Yes.
Be mindful to make sure your net sheet says estimate and not.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Because they'll. All right, so most of the discussion is, we've kind of got through, I'm gonna stay around and have dialogue, but a couple other points I'm gonna make. Get educated, listen. We've got a lot of information coming at us, and Melissa's sending us all kind of stuff, NAR sending videos. As a company, we're doing everything we can to protect you and give you information and keep you educated, but it's also your responsibility too. Watch some of these videos, read these emails, read your documents in detail. You'd be surprised at how many times somebody will call me about a question and I'll just say, let's read it together. And they go, oh, never mind. Because they just really didn't read it. And if you read something you're not clear about it, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's break it down. But if you haven't read it, you need to read it. You need to be very familiar with your own documents, and these are how you make a living. So get a highlighter out, go through it, highlight things that you're not sure about. Yeah.
Jane, there's a question from Lisa Cannon in the chat.
All right, let me see if I can pull that up. Can you answer this question, which was posed to me? A realtor friend of mine in Florida said their broker said not to put up a virtual tour because it's considered a showing and needs a buyer's agreement. Have there really been anything said about that? I have not heard anything about that. I think that's a stretch because you're not. You have pictures. I mean, you're gonna have to say where do you draw the line? I think if you're going to a property to do a virtual showing for somebody, that's a showing. And we're always going to have opinions about this. It's not going to be, we're not attorneys and all that. And I don't see this being, I think if something like that were to start happening, they would probably come out and give us, rule changes and warnings. They're not going to just start, giving us fines. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be a big thing. If honestly, whether you've taken an ABR or not, if you haven't taken it this year, and honestly, even now the forms are changing and they're updating the materials, take it. It's free for the rest of the year.
I don't see your next class up anywhere.
It's up. Actually, Cedric's going to
Last two Saturdays of this month. Last two Saturdays. This is the advantage of people that work 24/7 through the day. Back to back Saturday. Let's do this.
Last two Saturdays?
It's the last two Saturdays of this month, right, Cedric?
Yes.
Yeah.
24th and the 31st.
It should be on the hub.
It's on there.
What was that, Marshall?
I put a link up on the chat. If you'll go up on
link to
the
the chat.
Zoom chat, I put the link up for that.
And
then
without
also
without
the,
sounding
written class.
okay, without sounding
The 23rd and what?
whatever,
Friday
it's
and
on the
Sunday.
hub.
Saturday.
Yeah, 12 hours. Yeah.
12.
Yeah.
12 hours.
12 hours. For-
And
12 hours for-
also we'll be doing a role play huddle in a couple of weeks as well on the 20th of August.
That's right. And again, we're putting all this in the hub. We'll be sending out emails. I'm probably gonna start doing maybe even weekly town halls, just because we've got, it is a big, and I'm having conversations every day, and over in all of our companies and all the states, we have, around 450 agents. So we don't have 10%, on the call tonight. Next thing I'll say is read your forms. I just said that already. Stay informed, have conversations. If you have questions,
Yeah.
call your broker, call the staff, call me, whatever. Here's another one. Focus on listings, people.
What I do.
That's going to fix your problems, because listings will create buyers. And now what's going to happen is you're going to have all these buyers who whether they're doing it for self-interest, or whether they just don't really realize, and like, I can't afford it. They're going to be more buyers calling listing agents, and you're going to have, and the likelihood is they're not going to buy that house because that's the only property they've called about or whatever. Your chances of getting more buyers from your listings are increased. So it's a great time to be a good listing agent. So for that reason, the SRS is one that you need to take. And that's an elective for the ABR. You should take SRS and start focusing on listings. Listings will get you buyers too. You don't have to just do listings, but I tell you that there's a saying that I used to tell people in the ABR class, which is, there's not a problem that you have that more clients won't fix. But the actual saying that I coined years ago was there's not many problems that you have in this business that more listings won't fix. Listings fix problems. Promise. I promise. Build your value, continue to build your value with your clients. And some of you guys already do this, some of you know about it. Hey, our school is approved for mortgage courses too. Whether you want to do mortgages or just want to be more knowledgeable to increase your value to your buyers. The more knowledgeable and more valuable value you have with your buyers, the more likely they're going to be loyal to you, and more likely they're going to agree to sign your buyer brokerage agreements, right? And having a mortgage license isn't going to hurt you, especially next year. If the rates come down like they're talking, they're saying 4 or 5 rate reductions, and you're going to see sales increasing and refinances increasing. You're going to, if they go down 4 or 5 times, you're going to have the problem we had in 22, where people say, well, I was going to sell my house, but I think I'm just going to refinance it. And then you're going to say, dang, you have to call my lender. Or you could say, let me do your refinance for you. So the mortgage class is powerful. It's 20 hours, 20 hours. We're literally doing it. I think it's next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 to 5, and you're done. Or you can do it once a
CE.
week or online. Oh yeah, we have it approved for CE too. 20 hours of CE. So
What is?
the mortgage course,
Mortgage course at CE for real estate,
we got it approved for it.
20 hours?
If you take it with our school, yeah, 20 hours.
Without taking an
and the other-
exam.
What's that? Yeah, you get the CE without the exam. So you can just take the class, get the CE and bounce if you want. But well, why would you? The
More
last thing I'll put-
referrals.
More referrals. And the last one is a quote about being positive, being confident. This is a quote from Anthony Robbins, who's one of my mentors. The person with the most certainty in a given situation will absolutely influence the other person. So the more confident and confident you are with what you're talking about, the more people are going to take your lead. So if you say, hey, this is how it works, this is what we do, here's what you need to do, and here's how it's beneficial to you. The answer is going to be a lot of times, that sounds good, versus, wishy-washy, or I'm not sure, or, you need to be more confident about what you're saying. Even honestly, you're better off be confident than you. By the way, you can always say, that's a great question. Let me get the answer for you. Any question you get, that's a great question, is always a good answer. Or my broker won't allow me to do that. That's another one that you can go with too, yeah.
And now it's my neighbor, so that's.
Well, my old broker would have, but now the new guy, he's a jerk. All right, so I'm gonna hang out, and we're gonna stay here to chat. Anybody has questions or just wants to listen in on what the dialogue here, we're gonna hang out and talk. It is being recorded, so we're gonna post that up probably tomorrow or Friday based on Adam's schedule.
I'll have to do that.
So what do y'all think? Any big questions or problems, concerns, ideas, complaints?
We always get complaints.
Yeah,
How it's done work for us to negotiate our commission, how, I mean, if it's against the rules. For us
what? To negotiate where?
Well, as far as, like, I had some
On the
the other
contract.
day, and on the contract, sent me an offer,
Mhm.
and he said, oh, I just saw that it's only 2.5% commission,
Yeah,
and, I can help you, that's for the.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
but wasn't that kind of out of line?
No.
With our-
No. So let's get clarity on that in terms of negotiating commission. What's safe and what's not safe in terms of how you do it. The key is you can't do it on the offer. The broker, you as the representative of the brokerage, can't negotiate the compensation from the other broker on the buyer and the seller's offer. The only people who can negotiate on an offer are the parties. So the buyer and the seller are the parties. We're really witnesses. Our signatures aren't even required to make it binding. So the buyer, so what you would say to an agent who said, oh, what's the call commission? And in that case, you said it was 2.5. And she had a call, and now the agent's still able to see what it is on MLS. And they were talking about bringing this offer, and the agent says, oh, you're only offering 2.5. And what they say? Well, that's not good.
I've already written it up.
And so what would happen is,
Rewrite.
what you would say is, put it in writing. It's just like if someone called you and say, hey, would your seller take, an offer of this, or would your seller pay 4% in closing costs? What would you probably say? Put it in the offer and I'll present it. Because I'm
Hey,
not gonna
Shane.
tell you yes or no, because I'm not gonna read it to the seller's mind. Yeah.
I use that story you told me about the commercial deal.
Uh-huh.
And you called the agent, said
Oh, yeah.
1%. Was that a mistake? I mean, because it speaks so much volume of how you conduct your offer outside of the buyer's brokerage agreement. I mean, a purchase and sales agreement.
Right. That you can negotiate it. Again, it all comes down to, if you reach out to the agent, you can pre-negotiate and say, what is the co-op commission? If they say it's whatever, you can negotiate with them on the phone. You can send them, documents. That is perfectly fine. You're negotiating. When you get to the offer, the only way you can modify whatever is being offered, if any, is the buyer has to ask the seller, not the broker has to. That's the key.
I thought we weren't supposed to negotiate, like call up and, I meant with the other agent to agent.
No, we're fine. It's fine to do. You're perfectly fine to do. We can't put it in the MLS, that's all. But you could absolutely negotiate with the other agent. I'm gonna put this link in the chat for everybody.
Jane, so bottom line, we just need to remember that negotiation is our key. Would that be correct?
Yep. Yeah,
Just,
everything is gonna be negotiation. And the other thing is to remember, I'm gonna put this link in there. If that's the link to the Google Doc that you guys can get, copy and paste those stipulations. And this is what it looks like, for everybody here in the room. It's gonna look like that. You can just go in here and copy and paste that.
Where's that at? Google, where?
That is, that document is on Google Drive, but that QR code that I put up there is goes straight to it.
Oh, I didn't get the QR.
Okay, I'll go back and show it to you. And I'm gonna email it out, text message it out. I'm gonna be hitting everybody up
Okay.
constantly with
Oh,
it.
you are? Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
So going back to, yes, negotiation is the key. And I think the biggest thing, if we take the stress away from how are we going to find out what is being offered, agents aren't calling me back as it is, all these documents, co-op commission. If you just remember, if you negotiate your commission in your buyer brokerage agreement correctly, then you put it in the offer. That's going to be my answer is, yeah, you can do all the co-op commission agreements and all, but just put it in the offer. The way we wrote it up, seller agrees to reimburse buyer or whichever one you use, because now the seller can counter and it becomes a negotiable item. You're not having to pre-commit, and that's where we're getting stuck is like, well, how am I going to find out? And what if they're not paying enough? But if you're negotiating your buyer brokerage agreement and you're getting in writing, you don't have to worry about it, really. You put your document with the buyer, they agree to it, you explain to them what it means and how they won't be obligated under these circumstances. Then you just go look at houses and then you write it and put it in the offer, just like your closing.
The only thing is we don't get really, beat up is when the wife really, really, really wants that house
Mhm.
and the seller says, heck no, I'm not paying you.
Yeah,
And then you have to come back and say, either we have to walk away or y'all got to figure out some way to pay.
I agree with you, but what's the difference in closing costs?
I understand.
Yeah, but yeah, I
mean, I'm
agree.
just saying,
That's where you're gonna
That's
get.
gonna be a really hard
Sure.
conversation.
It will be, and look, if I'm honest about it, like it depends, like, depending on the market, how much inventory, all these things vary, based on what you would do, what the buyer, seller would do. So like if there's not a lot of inventory and we're making an offer and my buyer brokerage says, whatever amount, 3%, and the seller says, no, I'm only paying 1 or whatever, buyer didn't have the money, I have to make a decision too. Do I want to take the 1? Do I want to say, sorry, my broker won't allow me, and let's go look at another property. That's a decision that, you have to make at that point, at that time.
But I think, it's just gonna make that sharp conversation.
Well, the lender
the buyer.
also can offer incentives.
So what's this
The lender can offer incentives, yeah,
for the?
To offset the
closing
commission.
costs and things like that.
All right.
Yeah, hey, that's a good point. That's when you can start leaning on your affiliates instead of saying, look, hey, we're gonna need all hands on deck on this deal. Everybody needs to dig deep and find out where we can cut some costs to make these numbers work. And if you're looking at it from a net number, that's what's most important to the seller, at the end of the day.
Mhm.
I had an agent call me and say, they had agreed, I'm trying to remember how it went down. I think they had listed it for, 5 and 2.5. But the agent wrote up an offer and put this stipulation in there, asking the seller to pay 3 because that's what the buyer brokerage had. And she said, yeah, and I showed my seller, and it was a full price offer, but the seller was like saying, well, that's just not fair. That agent's gonna get more money than you, and I don't like that. And she was like, and I don't know how to address it with the seller. I'm like, look, tell him to forget where the money's going and look at the net. Would you turn the offer down if the offer was just 0.5% lower than full price? Probably not. So don't get caught up with the other agent. It's a net number to the seller. Don't get caught up on where the money's going. Just look at net. And that way you don't get emotional.
So if you're the lender
Mhm.
and the agent, you can still compensate yourself better with that. whatever
Well,
you
the
said.
question is, if you're a lender and you're the agent, of course, you're disclosing it, to everybody and all that. But yeah, I mean, that's where the numbers can work better. If you're in a situation where you have to negotiate on your real estate commission and you're doing the mortgage, it gives you more flexibility. That's another sticking point with your buyer brokerage agreement. When you're saying, look,
Another lawsuit.
I'm helping you another lawsuit. Hey, listen, by the way, I'll mention that real quick. So I'll tell y'all, you know me, I like to tell stories. So the very first experience I had with a lender who was an agent, 1995, it was Kathy McDaniel. You all know Kathy. I was a listing agent. I had all these listings. Kathy calls me up. I'd never met her. She says, hey, this is Kathy McDaniel. I think she was Metro Brokers at the time. She goes, I'm going to be bringing you an offer on your listing. And I was just calling you to let you know. And I was like, oh, wonderful. I love working with my co-op agents. I'm looking forward to working the deal out and going closing with you. I said, have your people been pre-qualified? She says, yes, I pre-qualified. And I said, well, no, I mean, like with a lender, like an officially, She goes, I am their loan officer. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you were the agent. You're the loan officer. She goes, I'm both. And I said, you can't do that. And she goes, why not? And I said, because it's a conflict of something. And she schooled me. She goes, it is not a conflict. It is perfectly legal. I've disclosed to all parties and I represent my client even further than a typical buyer's agent would, and it's disclosed in legal.
Okay.
And I'm like, here's an example of what I was saying earlier about whoever's most confident. I was like, sounds like you are confident. And I'm like, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. So I'll go with it's legal. But I didn't know, and she acted very confident. I'm like, okay. And that was the first time in 1995 that I realized that someone could be both. Okay, here's the reality. FHA had a rule. Was not a law. It was a rule that a single person could not be compensated for 2 activities in one transaction. You couldn't be a locksmith and get paid a commission for selling a house. It was not about mortgage. It was about two functions. In January of 2023, right after we got our school approved, FHA came out with a specific statement instead said we are reversing our rule. Specifically, if a real estate agent is licensed in real estate, also is licensed in mortgages, they are allowed to receive compensation for both activities in the same transaction. So that was the only one of the FHA, conventional VA. None of the other ones even had a policy about it. FHA did, and they reversed it specifically for that. It is my opinion, as we continue to have more downward pressure on our commissions, I believe we're going to see more people being mortgage licensed as well. I would not agree with a listing agent doing a mortgage for the buyer because that's more or less dual agency. I wouldn't advise that. That's where you just refer it over to another lender, in your office. But here's where I think it will come into play, and this is why I decided to start doing the classes and then, talking to agents about getting their license, is when you have sellers, which we will have next year if the rates go down like they say, that say, well, I'm not going to list my house, I'm just going to refinance it. And then, whereas now you have to go, oh, I just lost a possible listing. If you had the license, you could say, no problem, let's talk about that. Let me show you how that works. Let me see if I can help you there. So you can have a policy say, I'm not going to do my own deal. I just don't want to be caught up in all of that stuff. And I don't, if the loan gets denied, I don't want to jeopardize. You can have that and say, no, I'm not going to do that, but I will be knowledgeable. I'll be able to advise. I'll be able to talk to the lenders more intelligently and let them know I know what they're talking about. And I'll be able to refinance for my clients if they shoes, if they want to put a pool in, I can do it, whatever, and it won't be any kind of, issue. So I think it's going to be more and more. We have about 15 agents right now that are licensed in both. And some of y'all don't know, but we literally yesterday, we were actually a branch under Nexa Mortgage, which is a national company. And yesterday we are officially approved mortgage brokerage. So American Mortgage Partners is an actual mortgage brokerage now. So we're excited about that. Yeah. Yeah. And hey, while we got you, don't forget, we have our title company, American Closing Partners. Put it on your contracts. They can do the whole process, even hold earnest money. So I'm just plugging away. I'm trying.
Right on.
I'm
Everybody's here.
plugging away.
What happened in 1995, that story you just told us?
Yeah.
He had all kinds of light bulbs just go bing.
Yeah, 1995. Yeah. I only took, 30 years to get here,
You're like,
to get those ideas.
you can do it.
What? Yeah. So anyway. All right, I'm gonna hang out. We'll hang out and talk. Anybody on Zoom land have any questions? Thank y'all for coming out tonight. See a lot of names flying by and see some people didn't have their. Oh, there's Melissa. We were talking about you. You probably heard me the whole time. Any new information that I didn't share? What's the latest with your client?
No, we're still on hold. He decided, I think, to go get a bio brokerage. So
Did he really?
decided,
Because you refused to do the flat fee deal?
yes, I'm like, yeah, you can't pay me that. Come on.
Yeah. My seller's already agreed to pay me why would I do that? Right.
Yeah.
He's
Anyway,
gonna
we're
go
waiting
find
on
somebody who-
look, as long
He's
as we
what?
can make it to the table. I said, as long as we can make it to the closing table, that's where our goal is.
That's right. That's the goal. And try not to do, unnecessary amount of work with people who don't appreciate you.
This is very true. Thank you.
Right.
Do all the work we
Yeah.
have to do to get it to.
Shane, I will,
Yeah.
I will, this video will be up, you said in
Yes.
the,
Yes, I'm
Got
going to, tomorrow, Adam's going to be converting it and then uploading on YouTube, and then we'll send the link out to everybody probably through email and maybe video, maybe text message too, just to make sure it gets on everybody's device and in their hands. In case whoever didn't get a chance to watch it or go back through it.
I
Shane,
may-
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brenda.
I may have a potential meeting on Friday. I'm trying to see if I can push it back a little bit. That would
Okay.
be for listing, but I'm gonna have a lot of questions that I
Yeah,
want to
we're-
look at. Yes. Okay,
That sounds
so
good.
I'll reach out to you if I need you.
Okay, that sounds
Okay.
good. Good to hear from you, Brenda.
You too, thanks.
Michelle, did you have something?
Yes, I was just wondering, as far as the slides, did you put a link up? Somebody came to my door, I apologize. But I'm sure it will.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually put the whole video up, and if you want me to put the slides up separately, I will.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm pretty sure, of course, we'll be able to get it that way then if it's video
Yeah. And if you
recorded.
need any of it, let me know and I can share it. And of course, if you get in a situation and you want to for clarity, don't hesitate to call or text me. That's what we're here for.
Okay. Thank you
Good
so
to see
much.
you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
My 92-year-old mother-in-law. So. like that.
Great
Yeah.
class, by the way.
Thank you. I'm not a notary. Yeah, I didn't have time to get one. Actually though,
Well, this room's.
Tracy, who, our paralegal, our closing agent, she's a notary and she's here every day, but she already left. But yeah, I don't know off the top of my head who else might be handy.
Well, I don't know. When did you say they're doing the mortgage class?
The next mortgage class is actually, next Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, but it's 9 to 5.
9 to 5.
Now,
Now, it's $2.99 or what is it?
it's actually, we reduced it to $199 because we have, we have a lot of people in there.
Four easy payments of $49.99.
Well, they actually do have it where it's like 99 and then there's something else, or something, payment option, I think. But yeah, we have a lot of people.
Where are the classes at?
It's actually Zoom only. She's teaching it out of Lawrenceville. It's Gina. What was interesting though, we started seeing we got a lot of people taking the mortgage class from Pennsylvania and Iowa and California who were agents at Keller Williams and Remaxes. And so we're starting to see, and we had one class with 60-something agents getting their mortgage license. It was in Pennsylvania.
I want less people to get it, but I want to get live.
You want less people to get it? Yeah. That's the whole, you want it live.
Everybody gets.
Yeah. Now, Gina, we did have one version of class that was, live. It was like every Monday night for 7 weeks or something like that. But that was in Lawrenceville. So that was the only downside. Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, it would just help you. Give
Yeah.
you the knowledge to, and like you said, if they're refund, but it would give you the knowledge to be able to know. Like I got one right now with Chase. I've not heard anything from them. They said that Chase doesn't communicate with the agents in Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, on both the mortgage and the title side, I've learned so much in the just by being involved in the business side. It's just so much that you don't know, and that it's kind of not shared with us as agents, and it's intentional. They intentionally don't share a lot of information with us about that kind of stuff, but I've learned a lot about both of those initiatives. That's very fascinating.
I saw that second class, 3 hours with them.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Right.
There's so much I haven't learned here on this year.
Yeah, Marshall's doing it. I think it's 20. I think Marshall already got offline, but yeah, I believe that's right. No, Marshall's on that. Marshall, when is the next car contract?
August 22nd,
August 22nd.
2 weeks
So that's
from
coming up.
tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, it's 2 weeks from tomorrow, Lori. It's 2 weeks from tomorrow. Marshall just confirmed.
Yeah,
Tomorrow,
I have a,
I copy and paste it to my email and I'll get my email. And
Awesome. It's in person, yeah. Marshall, is that live and Zoom or just in person?
yes, it's a hybrid, both live and Zoom. Yep.
Some of the classes we got coming up, we are doing some live only. So you kind of have to watch when you're registering, because some of them are, we just want, we want to encourage people to come in and, reconnect. And, yeah. It's, it's good for the people who are speaking too. So.
Yeah, but I'm gonna do the one with Seth tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, I agree. Watch the videos, take other people's classes, give you a different perspective. You may have some points of, differentiation, but it's better to have more, knowledge so you can make some of your own.
Yeah.
I saw that.
And I was
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously they can, but they don't have to, so you can avoid that issue that you have. No, SRS is not free. ABR is the only one that's free. And yeah, NAR just said that, yeah. So, but the SRS one, I'm doing that one in, I think it's Greenville, South Carolina. I'm doing that in about a month. And, that one is discounted. I think it's like $199 maybe, but it's in Greenville.
When you got.
Yeah.
81.
I don't think we're doing that soon.
81.
I may be wrong. It may be both. I think it's only live. I have to go back and forth.
70.
Anyway,
I just.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh.
I went.
This was good.
Yeah.
Let me know anytime.
Yeah. We're gonna start putting more evening classes on the calendar. We're gonna start putting more evening stuff on the calendar. Just in general.
Yeah.
We're trying to do
That's
that
right.
for a month.
So, yeah, so I want, that's what I did.
I think next year, I'll try to ask the first year to do the Well, I can do that. If they do a Saturday, if you see anything, let me know. I'll watch the thing too.
Yeah. If we had a response on that, it might be more.
Yeah, so see if you do, because I could do the first Saturday, but the second Saturday you already got out.
Just let them know you have to take them.
Back to back, okay.
Take the first half and then take the next.
Oh,
half,
like
and
the
then like it. So it
Right.
could be like a Saturday and then it's gonna have to be 1 or 2 days. next
Okay.
week. That's a possibility.
And I could do that, okay.
Okay.
So I know I can do this 24th.
That is
So, yeah, and then so more, if I would be more to do that. It's like, I don't know that I would want to work, like you said, but then I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be doing it to realize, is it?
In the situation, you might find yourself with a friend, a personal friend or family.
Yeah, they could have thought you're helping them more
You're
than.
like, no, I want to do this for you.
Right,
That's
yes.
your young line, or, you know, what is that? I think that it could be a situation.
Yeah. Get out of here. Right.
I gotta go back to the hospital.
Right. And the knowledge, I mean, that right there in itself.
There's
one place you have to know.
All right.
There's so many new lenders out there that when you get a approval letter, you're like, are they really approved?
All right. get to work.
Issue thing that I was,
Yeah.
the guy called me and he was like, that is the same one, those people, they're back in, we're closing the 19th. And it's already appraised and everything. It may have a, they haven't requested you to handle anything yet.
Yeah.
But they're just like, well, I mean, you talk to him.
Bye.
That-
Bye.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, she gave me a hard time about, because the offer came in and it was the last week. And they asked for closing costs, which they didn't have in the last one. And then they came in and asked for $5,000 worth of American.
I'm saying, I'm not
And that
telling you this.
33 years.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that.
Well, I
So
mean,
I said, well, she got
Bye,
upset
Shane.
with me about that. She was about the air conditioning thing, so they accepted the offer. Like, I expected them to give me her time. They just accepted it. They just wanted it
They
done.
went down, yeah.
And,
They were tired of it.
when they asked for the air conditioning,
See, Mark, chat with you soon. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Make sure.
Great meeting. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
See you guys.
We'll
Y'all
see
take
you
care.
soon.
All right.
See ya.
Have a good evening.
so when they asked for the fourth, or 5,000, I knew. I was against it. She gave me a hard time, but he was.
I gotta take a quick shot. I'm not
Well, yeah.
gonna-
And so finally, after she breaks me over the coals about it, she's like, well, if they will just say that there's nothing else is gonna happen. I said, well, ask them to do diligence. And then the only thing that can happen from here out is financing or prison. And I said, I'm not really worried about either one, but you know, anything can happen. And she, okay, I said, but let me just at least go back and ask them to take it. And just try.
Yeah, he's come behind now.
Because I thought 5 was way more than fair. It was 12, and that's- But, and then raised
I don't even,
by
I don't even eat pecan seeds.
2,000, even though without taking that into consideration, but, anyway.
The onions.
Okay, just at least
Hey,
try,
you know,
and so I did it, the 4,000.
I didn't know. I
Oh,
got
that's
that.
good.
I
At
know.
least they feel better about that.
Yes.
A little small
Yes.
victory.
Yeah. And just to get it done.
For what?
I would have paid for it myself.
Oh, yeah.
Before I let that.
You were tired of this.
Also, their, I told you about that, their agreement is expired. Yeah, then July it expired, now the contract had in, that they'd be there, paying me because they know. I tried to get them to sign an extension.
Come with a listing? So, by the way, the listing.
The agreement
It
doesn't,
depends
oh,
on-
yeah, and it said that, but did they read it?
I'm sorry.
You know, and I didn't push them into all that.
Yeah.
There's so much cover, but
So.
I really think.
So how would you say the building and that?
Agreement. I'm sure she'll go back and check the dates,
I mean, I know we would come up.
Yeah, not only
because
does it,
that's just.
not only does it
Okay,
extend,
so you can put it.
technically, you give them
Yeah.
notice to extend
Okay.
based on the number of days
You got that.
contract.
The way he did, the way he did it.
Right, and does that add, I was gonna ask you, so the 6 weeks that was under contract before, so I actually had that 6 weeks.
Yeah, I got you. So
You-
you got
you-
them.
I think you do have to give them notice of that prior to the expiration of the contract. So whether or not at this point, you could give them the notice to have those 6 weeks, I don't know. But I do know that it's extended to the contract, to the end of the contract.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was true, I needed to make sure, you know, that
Yeah.
anybody that's gonna try that, it's her.
Right.
So, anyway, but thank you, it was
Yeah.
great, I actually did one this morning too, because I thought, if we get it twice in one day, was it through
No, we're.
Oh, yeah, somebody else did one.
Somebody did one online this morning,
How did that go?
With us? Our
I
office?
think it was through Invoice.
Oh, maybe an invoice.
It might have been with Invoice, and I'm doing the contracts.
Oh, good, yeah. Hey, like I said, the more information you get, the better you're
Right, well,
confident.
contracts, I always try to do with all the changes, and I'm like, I need it.
You gotta have it. It's gonna be mild, but it's gonna get. It'll become what it
I
is.
mean, I wasn't too nervous until.
All right, guys.
it was close.
I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. If anybody has any questions, give me a call or text me.